Hey kids, Castro Gaming here, and a beat around the bush. We're gonna go over Moxie. Moxie just released a review of Borderlands 4, so we're gonna do a quick little reaction to it. And without further ado, here is his review of Borderlands 4. Cannot wait.
Guys, what is up? Moxie here with a Borderlands 4 video, and if you are watching this video, that means that Borderlands 4 is launched or is about to launch. I have been playing this game for a bit now. I have over 140 hours. I absolutely adore this game. I've been like nonstop grinding and playing. I've leveled all of the characters to level 50, and I wanted to give you guys my like early impressions. Now, I know early impressions at like 140 hours might sound weird to some people, but like I put in over 5,000 hours into Borderlands 3. I am a huge Borderlands nerd, and while I'm not a professional reviewer and I can't speak about things like level design or sound score, I really just kind of wanted to get my thoughts out there on this game. Now, a few things to note real quick. This video is not sponsored by 2K. 2K's never like required me to say anything positive or negative about a game, but I know like people perceive like, oh, if it's sponsored, he's not speaking the truth. So I purposely have not had this video sponsored. I can say whatever I want. And I just wanted to talk about this game. We're talking about if Borderlands is good, if it's fun, if it's addicting, all of the things I liked and all of the things I didn't like. There's plenty of both. I hope you guys kind of enjoy this. It's not scripted. I have nothing written down, so we're probably just going to be ranting. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let's do this. So the first thing I want to talk about is performance, which is something that I think has been a concern for a lot of people, and it is still a concern for me. Now, my game ran very well while I was playing it. I had DLSS on and frame gen on, and I know some people talk about like, oh, there's like an input delay with frame gen or something like that. The game felt great to me. In most areas, I was around 160 to 170 FPS. When I was indoors, I was well over 200 FPS. Without frame gen and without DLSS on, I get about 70 to 80 FPS. If you're wondering if you should get this game and you're on PC, make sure that you have at least the minimum specs. I really don't think this game will run very well on below minimum specs, if run at all. And I really think that this game needs like DLSS and frame gen. That's not to say that the performance is good, but there are tools in the game and settings that you can tweak to make it run decently. Now, I've heard from other people that it ran horribly for them. I can't really speak for them. I can only speak from my personal experience. In over 140 hours, I have not crashed a single time, and it's just been pretty solid. Now, there is one big issue that we do need to mention, and that is hitching.
Ooh, that's rough.
Dude, look at the hitching while driving. Ugh. So when I was driving to new areas on my first playthrough, anytime I would enter a new area, I'd pretty consistently encounter hitching. It was bad. I would take multiple hitches in a row. The game would slow down. It would stutter. This was mainly when I was exploring new areas for the very first time. I don't know, like maybe the game was just like loading the shaders for that area. But if I played in that area for a while, or if I traveled back to that area, I wouldn't hitch as much. And I wasn't hitching on my second playthrough nearly as much. But it does seem like anytime that you go to an area that is totally new and totally unexplored, you will hitch a lot. It seemed like most people were encountering this issue. Not the end of the world, but definitely frustrating. The next thing to talk about is the like campaign and the story. Not going to be spoiling anything, so I don't really want to talk about specifics. But overall, I enjoyed the story. It's a huge step up, in my opinion, from Borderlands 3. I know that's not saying much, but the humor, like everything that they said going into this, the humor is more toned down. It is a grittier, darker, more violent story. And there's some highs and some low points of the story. I definitely think the pacing was a lot better. One of my biggest issues with Borderlands 3 is like so many times you just like are waiting for dialogues or to finish and characters to stop talking and they just won't shut up. And you get stuck standing and still like for 5 minutes. There is some moments of that, but it's definitely way toned down. And a lot of times when a character's talking, you just go out and explore the open world. So pacing felt better. The story's not going to win any awards, but I thought it was solid. I was engaged with it, and I'm not really a story gamer. So if you're a Borderlands fan, I think you're going to like the story. I think it is much better than Borderlands 3,
Nice.
but it's also not like an Expedition 33, if that
No,
makes sense. It
course
is
not.
solid all around. Now, I did like some of the villains, and I don't want to say too much, but like I didn't think that the Timekeeper was as great of a villain as I was hoping him to be, and I thought that some of the other side villains were actually very good and had some like standout moments. And that's all I'll say on that. Next thing to talk about is the open world. Now, I really wasn't sure if an open world was going to work in Borderlands. I personally, part of the reason I like Borderlands games is because they are linear. However, I really enjoyed the open world. The way that the story is kind of laid out is there's a lot of big gaps in travel points where a story area will start you in one area and it'll bring you all the way very far away to another area. And I think that's very intentional. If you're just beelining story, you might find it tedious to have to constantly keep moving from area to area. But I think Gearbox has done this so that you're trying to they're trying to distract you because there's a lot of things going on in the open world. There's bounties, there's side quests, which I've done hardly any. there's so many side quests I just haven't touched. I personally just didn't really want to spoil them for my first real playthrough on stream, so I kind of just beeline story. But in terms of not side quests, there's a lot to get distracted by in the open world, from hidden dungeons, hidden bosses, these drill site activities that kind of function like slaughter shafts, these world bosses that spawn. There's just a lot going on. There's a lot to farm and there's a lot to find. And if you let yourself be distracted, I think you'll find a lot of cool things there. If you are just kind of beelining story, I don't think you'll think all that much of the open world. But if you let yourself get distracted, there's a lot of cool things. And 90% of the time, I would say you're very rewarded for exploration. That's something that Gearbox has always done well. And I think they're doing it well again here. Now, I don't think every Vault Hunter tree is created equal. Some of them are just absolutely crazy, and some of them feel not great. I'm not too worried about balance because I know that's something that's going to massively change over time. But overall, Vault Hunters feel really great, and the progression on them feels awesome. The big thing that matters to me is transformative progression, meaning that I can start at level 5 and my action skill is doing one thing, and then it's doing a totally different thing at level 30. And there's so many transformative things at so many different levels. It's not like you get to level 30, get your capstone, and then it's over. Every point felt impactful, and every point felt like it meant something. And I've already been min-maxing, and I just can't stop respecking. I've actually gone broke on multiple characters respecking, which, by the way, respecking is always a percentage of your gold or cash, so you can never actually run out of respecs. If you have 20 gold, it'll cost you 2 pieces of gold. So you can never not respec. So be doing it a lot. There's
great.
Also a test range now in the game, which works great. And you can test your builds and test if interactions are working, which makes my life so much easier. So I've really enjoyed that aspect. One of my favorite aspects of the game, and I didn't think I would like this at all. In fact, I readied up a complaint video about how it was going to ruin Borderlands, is the part system. Now, I was really worried that if you could roll a Tediore part on a Maliwan gun, or you could roll a Jacobs part on every gun, that every gun would just start to feel like a Jacobs, or every gun would start to feel like a Maliwan, and you'd kind of ruin that gun identity. However, I've really enjoyed this system because it just totally changes the way that you think about weapons and the way that you farm them. Farming in this game is way more optimized. You can just use the Moxie's Encore machine to constantly respawn a boss. If you need to farm a boss a ton, it's way more easy to do that. You don't ever need to save quit. And part of the reason farming is great is because the part system is so interesting. So, for example, if you're farming a legendary sniper rifle, right? And you really want this legendary sniper rifle. It's a Ripper sniper rifle. It does a ton of damage, and it's great against single targets. That is cool, but maybe you want that sniper rifle to also be good at mobbing. And then you can farm that specific sniper rifle and try to get it with a Jacobs part, so now it's going to ricochet. And even though that's a Ripper gun, you might be able to get it with a Jacobs part and then use a Jacobs enhancement just to pull one up, which gives you more ricochets on it if you're not critically hitting. And so even if you have a gun that's a super favorite of yours, these new enhancements and the new part system allows you to change those things. you could find a Vladov assault rifle that maybe does a ton of burn damage, and you want to use that burn damage for your status effect build, but Malawan has the enhancement that lets you spread status effects on kill, so you're going to farm that AR until you get the Malawan part, so now you're spreading that burn damage on that assault rifle to enemies. It probably won't matter to a lot of people, but if you're like into the theory crafting, it's a really really cool system, and it's gonna mean that we're gonna be farming a lot. We're gonna be farming a lot. It does seem like part rolls increase, and the amount of part variance increases as you go up in difficulty. So you're not gonna be seeing part like weapons at like with 4 different parts at level 5, but as you play more, the rolls get even crazier and crazier.
Nice.
I also really like the ordnance slot. I don't want to like go on about it too much, but the ordnance slot makes grenades and rocket launchers feel the best that they've ever felt in a Borderlands game. I've talked about it before, but I've never really enjoyed using grenades. I didn't really use grenades at all in Borderlands 3 unless I had to, or it was a grenade build, and didn't really enjoy using rocket launchers. The ordnance slot just makes them feel good. You can build around them. You can have huge ordnance uptime, and they're really satisfying to use. Now, I have been kind of raving about the loot system and the gear and stuff like that, but there is one really big downside and some big issues that I want to talk about that's mainly balance related. Once again, I'm not too worried about balance, but I think Gearbox has been a little bit afraid to give legendaries the strength that they need, because, you know, in the past, a lot of Borderlands games, they've nerfed a bunch of legendaries when the game launches and the community gets pissed, people leave. So I think the legendaries aren't quite as strong as they need to be. That's not saying that there isn't really powerful legendaries, but in this game, one of the big new additions is underbarrels, and underbarrels are unbelievably strong. I could find a green Jacobs with a underbarrel attachment, and it will be stronger than a lot of legendaries that I could find.
No
and so
way.
that didn't feel very good. And I think it's just a balance thing, where I hope that they buff up some of the legendaries and make them feel better.
Yeah.
Because even though they're hard to get, doesn't mean that they're good. And a lot of the underbarrels are so powerful that they just like outshadow a lot of other things. And so definitely some loot imbalance there.
It's not good.
am confident that they could fix that. But yeah, keep an eye out for underbarrels on your playthrough. The next thing to mention is difficulty. Now, I think people are going to view difficulty in this game differently. And if you are wanting to experience Borderlands to its fullest this time around, personally, I'd recommend hard difficulty. You can play on whatever you want. I played on hard. One of the cool things about hard is you deal way less damage if you're not matching elements. If you are shooting like armor bar with radiation damage, you deal 50% less damage. So you are heavily penalized for not matching elements on hard mode, which I think is really cool. It means that you need to like really focus on the elemental system in hard mode, which is awesome. But the other thing about like hard mode and the difficulty they're doing this game is enemies scale up in level like crazy. There are a lot of the times where you might encounter one area where enemies are your level, and then the next area when they're like 4 or 5 levels higher, and enemies that are higher level have tons of damage reduction against you. And so it's really important when you're playing to like be doing your side quests, be doing your things, because you will encounter some very, very difficult enemies and some tough times if you're not keeping up with your loot, if you're not getting on-level weapons, and if you're not getting XP, because enemies in certain areas will just be really high level. Now, that might annoy people because there's not like a clear reasoning for why one area is a higher level and one area is a lower level, because it could literally be from one pack to the next. And I think this is Gearbox trying to have like, oh, like this area is like, you know, a high level area where the loot might be better, but that's not really communicated very well. So I think that's going to lead to some frustration. I personally didn't mind it because I kept up with my stuff, but I did hear some people just getting really frustrated and just not all of a sudden not be able to kill anything. The next thing to mention is the movement. Now, the movement in this game, it just feels like after you play it for like an hour or two, it kind of just becomes second nature. At least for me, it was. It's very intuitive. It never feels clunky. There's so many cool things you can do. I will say that the grappling hook is like only being to points is a bit of a bummer, because sometimes you'll get stuck on like shoulder height cliffs or like things where you should be able to jump over. But like overall, The movement makes the gameplay so much more interesting, and the enemies in this game are relatively deadly. They hit hard, they do a lot of damage, and so you're
Ooh.
definitely incentivized to be using the movement to avoid damage. A lot of the boss attacks are telegraphed, and you know they give you the way to avoid them. But if you do get hit, you are punished.
Hmm.
Now, I do want to say,
Okay.
in terms of bosses, obviously not revealing anything, but I thought the bosses were definitely a step up. I didn't think they were all that challenging, to be honest. Maybe that's because I was, doing some cracked Harlow things. I did play through the game on Harlow, but I found the mobbing sections when there was multiple elites with multiple modifiers a whole lot better than the like bosses in terms of challenge for the most part. Now, the one thing that's making the mobs very difficult is the modifiers. Most of these modifiers are fine. However, there's some that are like really tough to deal with to the point of annoyance. For example, there's an elemental eater mod that can
Oh,
roll on enemies that when you deal that specific damage to them, they heal. But for example, I might be playing a Harlow build where all of my damage just deals bonus cryo. And now all of a sudden I just can't kill this guy because I'm
damn.
just dealing bonus cryo damage and he's eating it and it heals him a ton. So there's definitely some annoyance with modifiers. I'm sure they're gonna adjust them, but like another one is this modifier called centripetal. That when you kill an enemy, it creates a black hole that you just like can't escape from. And if you get multiple enemies with centripetal, it becomes a huge pain in the butt. And in a game where it gives you such precise control of your character, getting sucked into multiple black holes in a row where you lose all control of your character just feels terrible. So the modifier system definitely amps up the difficulty, but there are some that I just like really don't like, and I don't think
Ugh,
they're making the game more fun in any way.
it's not
Now, I
good.
do want to just mention Endgame. I'm not going to go into any specifics or anything like that. Totally spoiler free, but I would feel dishonest if I didn't mention my feelings about the Endgame because I'm glad that we have an Endgame system, but Endgame to me is currently the weakest aspect of this game.
Hmm.
If I had a score for the campaign and the base game, whatever that score would be would get knocked down by at least 1 point by the end game. That is all I'll say. I'll probably have like a separate video on the end game. I don't want to go into detail because I know a lot of people aren't there yet, and so I don't want to say more than that. But there's definitely some things at Endgame that I wish we had that we just don't have. That's all I'll say,
Damn.
guys. That is going to kind of do it for our like review. Some
Okay.
keynotes. If you are below minimum specs for PC, I would be very careful, very cautious. This game runs great for me, but I can only speak for myself, and it sounds like it could be a total nightmare if you can't have frame gen or you can't use DLSS. So just be very, very careful of that. If you're a Borderlands fan, I think you're going to like this game. It is very Borderlandsy. There is, some of the cringe humor and stuff like that from Borderlands 3, but it is definitely toned down. It's
Okay.
more found in the side quest than the main campaign. But the loot, the shoot, those aspects, I think this game does very, very well. And if you are not a Borderlands fan and you're on the fence, I would definitely go watch other videos. I am, inherently biased to Borderlands. I like this game. I put 5,000 hours into Borderlands 3, but I know a lot of people couldn't even put 5. So I really dig it. I think it's great. There's definitely a lot of things that they need to improve from performance to balance to the end game and more. But I think it's a great launching point for the game, and I can't wait to see what they do with it in the future. I will catch y'all in the next one, guys. Take care. Bye.
All right. That was it. Whoa, shit. That was the review. Hallelujah. He might be biased, but at least he's honest. Thank you, Moxie, for a great review, as always. And guys, that's pretty much the video. I think he's got a lot of great points about that. I was kind of worried about the end game and the performance, especially without day one patch. And lo and behold, there are some issues that have to get resolved with the day one patch. And of course, end game is lacking, which freaking sucks. But hey, more will come eventually. And you know, the imbalance of the weapons, that green underbarrel problem. I think it's just the underbarrel issue specifically. And they need to buff up some of the legendaries, which, that will come with time. Outside of that, it sounds like it's going to be a freaking great game, and I cannot wait to play it. So hopefully, y'all like this video, and I'll catch y'all on the next one. Peace out, Cub Scouts.